Hey, you dorks! Long time no see. Tired of all your lame-ass dolls from the Boar store? You better strap in and get ready. Today we're gonna take some socks from a sports supply website and turn them into dolls that'll get you f***ing laid. These ain't your grandma's arts and crafts. These are R-rated, MLG pro f***ing works of art. So f*** this f***ing shit, you bitches. We're gonna grab this f***ing bull by his balls. You don't know what's cool? You think you do, but you don't. You don't know your ass from a hole in the ground.
Backstage!
Alright, you cool guys and gals. To commemorate the release of Sonic Mania Plus, we're making some dolls from Sonic Mania Plus. I'm going to show you how I made Ray the Flying Squirrel and Knuckles. So enough chit-chatting around, I got a lot of work to do and I'm just going to get started. To make my Knuckles doll, I will need one pair of red baseball socks, one pair of white socks, one light tan sock, one green sock, one yellow sock, one gray sock, a scrap of black fabric, some stuffing, dark purple buttons, needle, colored thread, scissors, and I'm also going to use a chopstick and a measuring tape. So let's start with our red baseball sock. Baseball socks can be great for these kinds of projects because they're brightly colored, they're really long, and they're thick, so the stuffing isn't likely to peek through. I'll just take over half the length of the foot and cut straight across. Set the rest of the foot aside. One thing about thick socks is that they'll fray at the edges when you cut them, so I need to just shake some of that loose. Then I'm going to take my stuffing and fill it up, but I won't pack it too tight. Next, we're going to close it up using my favorite stitch. It's the ladder stitch. The ladder stitch moves across both sides of fabric like the rung of a ladder, and up one side like the leg of a ladder, then back across like the rung, so on and so forth. It's a very easy stitch to make and highly effective. The ladder stitch is for when you want to close a seam on the outside, because it pulls the edges inward to make a clean look. As you can see, it's nicely closed with no edges poking through. And it's a good shape, so let's put that aside for a little while and build the head. I'm actually going to use a white sock for the base of the head, and if that doesn't make sense, you'll see the reason pretty soon. So again, a bit more than half of the foot. This is just a ladies' dress sock. I bought a couple packs of them during the liquidation of my local Macy's. Macy's. We only do floats now. After this is stuffed, I'll close the head butthole with the running stitch. This is the running stitch for those who don't know. Simply run the needle in and out through your fabric like Michael Phelps in a swimming pool. Just up and down through the top and bottom side. This can join two pieces of fabric, or, as I'm doing here, cinch together one continuous piece like the drawstring of a pair of sweatpants. That way the seam is closed up in a ball instead of an edge like we had for the top of the body. Now the head is nice and round, so let's get out the tan sock to make our face. I don't like seams breaking up a doll in many different places, so I'll be making the face out of just one piece. The heel of my tan sock. I'm cutting wide and round on one side and a bit sharper on the other end. It looks kind of like those helicopter seeds that you can pull open and stick on your nose. You know what I'm talking about? Anyway, first I'll running stitch the top of the face. Then I've got it pinned to keep it from shifting as I ladder stitch the face to the head. Yins like that new Sonic Mania? I've had a real good time with it, but I'm an old school guy with my Sonic. Jaleel White era Sonic, that's what I'm talking about. By the way, I hope you don't mind the redness on my finger. I seem to have developed some eczema blisters, question mark? I know it's kind of gross, but I put some lotion on it and it's all good. So as I'm getting the piece situated, I can stuff it little by little into its shape. This requires a bit of dexterity to hold the needle and pull the fabric while pushing in the stuffing, but it's not that difficult with some practice. Ladder stitch up the front, and it's Gucci. With that done, I took my tape and I measured out the length of the head from snoot to back. It was about 5 1/4 inches, and I'll get my red sock back out, the leg part, and cut just a hair more than that off of the sock. Then I'll drape it over the head, map out the eye holes, and trim the excess off of it. Obviously, the head is a sphere, and this fabric is not, so there's some slight bunching happening. To fix that, we just pinch the fabric up on top and pin it closed. We'll come back to that. Ladder stitch the front of the head. The thickness of the sock has a benefit of creating its own little ridge, which is pretty cool. I'm not stitching the sides of the head or the back for now. I'll lay out the sock over the gaps on each side, cut those out, and ladder stitch those on as well. Here's where the side seams will be stitched together, and the back of the head stitched up. I'll put the head aside again and come back to the body. I want to put the Nike on while I've got room to work, so I've taken the heel off a white sock and ladder stitch to the chest. I tried to pull tightly across the body and even stitch it twice over so that the pieces are level and I'm not left with a raised symbol on the front. With that set, I'll just ladder stitch the head to the body. Pretty simple. Now the rest of my foot I had sitting is going to be used for his limbs. Since we're going classic, I'm looking for those noodles, so I can get away with cutting this in half and then half again. The legs will get just a tiny bevel, so starting near the edge, then tapering down towards the ankle. The arms are straight up and down. A tiny bit of stuffing to stretch the top of the legs, and everything is ready to stitch on. Ladder stitch, you know how it is. And they ended up being a little long, which is no big deal. I cuffed them a little bit to the length I like, but the excess will get covered. It's nothing to worry about. So let's set the eyes. I've got a pair of buttons that I would like to be more purple than what they are, but they'll be okay for what it is. Sewing buttons on is really easy. It's just a matter of looping through the holes and through the fabric, and you can do this as few or as many times as you like. I want the black thread to stand out over the button, so I've looped each eye maybe 8 times. Yes, the buttons are circles. Sonic characters have oval eyes. I cannot accurately describe how unbothered I am by this. For our little pointy nose, I've got just a scrap of black sock. It doesn't have to be a sock. It could be a t-shirt or whatever, and I'm gonna bunch it up and ladder stitch it into a cone shape and attach it to the tip of the snoot. The head, I'm a little anxious about because I'm running out of real estate on my one sock, and I really thought one would be enough. So I cut 2 test pieces out of it. I'm sewing it up and testing it against the size of the head, and it's too small. I measured out how much I was actually going to need and just conceded that I wasn't going to make it. So I cut what I could, then I took the other sock and cut into that also. I ended up with 1 pair of threads that were 1 length, a second pair that were slightly longer, and a single that was slightly longer than that. Now that I have all my pieces out, I begin to stitch them all together. So the insides are facing out, of course, and so the running stitch is what we'll use here. I think 5 threads is going to be plenty for our boy, though I'm not exactly sure how many classic Knux has on his head. I think it's 5. In Tyson Hesse's animations, it looks like 5, with the Mickey Mouse effects on the back of the head. You know what I mean? How the ears are always facing front? On modern Knuckles, he has like 20 threads. It's too much. It's far too much. And it's supposed to be all 1 length, kind of like a bob, which I think I achieved successfully enough. And I took that test thread, which didn't work out, and it's pretty good tail size, so I recycled. We can tack our thread at the butt of the tail and run it to where our kink should be. Don't kink shame Knuckles. Don't. Now, pulling and shaping the tail, we can ladder stitch the kinks into place. Don't do it! Don't kink shame Knuckles! Alright, so it's clobbering time, and I've got our white sock again to cut the shape of our glove. It looks a bit like a crab claw when it's unfurled, but calm your knuckle nipples, because all it takes is a little curl, little stitch, and volissimo! No sweat. And now the ankles of my white socks have some ridges, and I think that will be a really nice touch for my knuckle cuffs. I cut those about 1.5 inches tall and folded them over and used a ladder stitch to secure them to the wrists, then to the fists. Okay, so here's the part I was most anxious about. Cutting roughly a 2.5-inch segment from my remaining sock, and cutting that straight up the middle, I'll start shaping the shoes. We'll cut a bevel on one side, flip and stitch just that curve. Stitch another half-circle piece to the back. I'm essentially making a rowboat. And to match / help that shape come together, we'll make 2 rectangles cut from the gray sock, flip them inside out, and running stitch that all the way around in like a jujube shape. Cut a slit in the one side, and we can just flip these pieces right side out and stitch them to the top of the shoe. When they're almost closed up, we'll stuff them and close them completely. We'll need just a scrap of the yellow sock, so I've cut a nice long strip here, and I'll cut those to wrap our shoes like a little pig in a blanket, sort of. It was shortly after doing these pieces that I realized Knuckles' yellow shoe accents aren't just stripes, they're almost like spats, but I'll let that go. Cut some smaller rectangles from the gray sock and ladder stitch on top of the shoe. I'm sort of tucking in the edges as I go along. And again, we don't need a whole sock for the green, I don't know, boot cuff? Something? I'm just taking strips off of this striped sock, and with them inside out, I'll stitch the top and bottom, leaving a slight hole to flip and stuff. I used to have a body pillow like this when I was younger. It was so comfy, man. Oh boy. These ended up being way taller than I wanted, but that's what happens when you don't have a plan. The last bit to do is to stitch on the mouth, and I've got another stitch for us. It's the back stitch. Starting your stitch slightly ahead of where you want, you bring the needle back behind your entry point and run under the fabric past your entry point, meaning right up against your previous stitch. It's like 1 step back, 2 steps forward. It's easy once you get the hang of it. So the first thing I did here was to make the smirk line, that little cheek hooch, which was the wrong place to start, because now I'm working to the right while also back stitching to the right. I'm moving forward and backward at the same time and in the same direction. It looks bad, so it's easy. Easy. Once you get the hang of it, it's so easy. So we're going to come back to that. Let's take a look at Ray. It's the same model, so I'll skip over a lot of the repetitive stuff and just kind of walk you through the differences. Now, most of our stuff is the same, but instead of a red gym sock, we'll have a regular pair of gold and yellow socks, and for the shoes, we just need 1 blue sock. So let's go. I cut an oval piece from my tan sock, and you'll see I'm pinning it to the body, but somehow I managed to get it crooked anyway. There's also a slight bubble at the end, but we can use the ladder stitch to tighten that up. Next we'll do Ray's nose, which is more of a typical Disney nose than Knuckles. It's a round little oval that will cinch up and ladder stitch onto the face like before. Instead of dreads, we have these little cowlicks that I sewed in sort of a wave, 2 wave shapes, and stitch those to the head. This is really an intuition thing, I'm not sure how to translate that. Eyes, they're dark green. I happen to have the exact same type of button I used with Knux, so neat. The ears I'll take from a piece of a foot. The ears I'll take from a piece of the foot, roughly 1.5 inches. I sewed them inside out into rounded triangles, leaving them open at the bottom. Then I flipped them right side out and stitched some tan triangle pieces to the front sides. Placing them over top of the darts on either side of the head, I ladder stitch around the front and stuff the back sides before closing them up. Let's put the head aside and pull out another white sock. Ray's gloves start about the same as Knuckles' gloves, but I want his hands to be open. So there's a bit more detail work in ladder stitching the palm for some dimension, and using the run and stitch to give a ridge for the fingers to shoot from. Now, each finger is going to be separated by a loop of thread across the top and bottom of the hand. To keep that loop secure, I made little tacks across the thread in several spots running the length of each finger. Without this step, the loops would eventually slide right off. That would be really dumb. Ray's cuffs are a lot like Sonic's cuffs, or really exactly like Sonic's cuffs, how they're collapsed on themselves around the middle. So once the cuffs are stitched on, I'll just wrap my thread around the center a few times, pulling it tightly and tacking that down. I don't want to talk about the shoes again, so there we go. They look a lot like Bart Simpson's legs. I mean, am I wrong on that? Whatever. We're almost done. I've got the other foot from my yellow socks. I ladder stitched the ankle end closed, and I don't know why I thought to do it that way, because ladder stitching does not work very well if there's too much slack from the fabric. So when I stuffed it, there was a stupid-looking ridge at the tip of the tail. It's not a big deal. It's easy to ladder stitch over it again to smooth it out, but that's just a little word of caution. The wings will come from the remaining toe piece that I've got. The top of them are cut on a slight bias so that when I stitch the arms, he won't end up in a permanent T-pose. The wings aren't going to tuck in completely, so I've got to strike a balance between having the wings open and having the arms look relaxed. This is all just ladder stitched together. Coming back to Ray's face, I learned from my mistakes and am backstitching like a somewhat competent seamster, and the result is pretty good. I tied the thread off in a nearby seam and pulled it through the back of the head so it's not visible. And so, that's that. I redid Knuckles' mouth so he's looking way better than before. I love these guys, man. They are so great and slightly derpy, which makes them even more amazing. My biggest critique on this design is that I made the bodies a little too big and the hands and feet a little too small. They aren't quite on model with their classic looks, but if you decide to make these yourself, you'll know what to look out for. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. I thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This stuff makes my body itchy. I'm going to get up and leave.